Please give a warm welcome to Rich and Pinder, Dave and Boulder. Thank you.
Good, it's working. Hello. And welcome. Thank you for coming out this morning. It's a great place. This has got to be the best room I've ever presented in. I've never ever seen a place like it. I didn't quite like the steps we had to come up. A little bit painful, but it's quite amazing. Thank you very much for coming. So, we're going to get on with the presentation. As you've been handed out all these bits of paper and your pens, this is hopefully an interactive presentation. It'd be great if you could all join in. I know normally when you come to these events, it's a nice chance to get away from work for a week, visit a lovely city like Rome or Cannes or whatever it might be, take in the sights, have a nice meal, and listen to some arseholes on stage droning on about how interesting they are and how interesting their companies are. This is going to be slightly different because we've got some very smart people. We've worked it out. The stage gets more intelligent as you go across, so I'm the thickie.
It's exponential.
But we're going to be sort of talking about some very interesting stuff, so it would be great if you could join in. I don't know how many people here are Italian, or hands up who's Italian? Okay, so it's,
Come on.
so because we're English, I mean,
You're the only good Italian.
I'm not. We'll try and talk slowly so that everybody can understand. But this first slide, it's not working. Yeah. This is a slightly harrowing image of a crack addict, and this is my metaphor for currently the current state of creativity in advertising. I think it's been one of those things over the last 20 years, there's been a very slow decline. I think when you look at the images one by one, you don't really notice it. But when you look at November 97 to January 89, there's an enormous difference. We lost all of their teeth there. But except that, strangely, the thing I quite like is that one there in March 81, suddenly everything got better. I don't know if she found a new dealer or got herself a boyfriend, but everything suddenly perked up. But it's a harsh criticism because I think creativity in advertising is in crisis. There are lots of issues. I don't think the work is good enough. I've been in the business for over 30 years, and I don't think I'm being as creative as I could be. I don't think the companies that I work around are being as creative as they could be, and I think that's a real challenge. The sad thing is that creativity is the most important product that we have in our agencies. It's also the most important product that we sell to our clients. Our clients employ us to transform their businesses, and they buy our creativity. And whether that's the product that we create or the thinking minds that they employ, it is still the most valuable asset that we all have at our disposal. But unfortunately, as a result of many things, creativity has become not that valuable and not that important. And I think there are lots of reasons for it. It's everything from education in schools, and we'll come on to that a little bit later on. Further education in colleges. There are now 300 colleges in the UK that teach advertising. Now they're going to be taught by people who no longer work in the business. They're teaching the future. You're teaching the future with people who have nothing to do with the present. And I think as a result of that, you get not very good products. It's also very, very expensive to go to college. On average in the UK, it probably costs about 10,000 for a year's course, which is a huge amount of money. So the only people who can afford to go to college are children of people who work in advertising. We've already got too many of those people in the business already. We need to start becoming much more diverse. I don't know if the situation is the same, but I guarantee, I'm sure it's the same in a lot of countries. Also, we've got a problem that the agencies, certainly in the UK and Europe, are predominantly owned by 2 or 3 people. And so suddenly creativity goes from being taken away from independent people who have a vision and a plan about how they want to challenge the way it's being done, and they're suddenly owned in a big corporation, and creativity becomes just another column on a spreadsheet, and as a result becomes a commodity. And this is a real big problem. And my frustration is how do we start to encourage new, more entrepreneurial problem solvers into the business, because this is the big issue that we have. And I think the more people like that we can bring into the business, it will transform it and create a business that is much more relevant for what we should be doing over the next 5 to 10 to 15 years. I was, these 2 characters, I've had the rug pulled under my feet by one of them, but many years ago I launched Brain Training, which was a game on the Nintendo DS with the character on the left-hand side guy called Dr. Kawashima, and he had a theory that the brain is like a muscle, and so you can just, the more you use it, the better you become, the more able you are to solve problems. And every day you would have these little problems and you become more competent at solving them. And when I was working on the project, I did it every day. And I actually found that the more I did it, the more able I was more able to solve problems very, very quickly, but also manage my time. It suddenly felt like I opened a little bit of a door into a cavern of creativity that I could be more creative more of the time. And I found that very, very stimulating. I think we all, as creative people, we all like to have other things that we do. I like screen printing, I like being an artist on the side, but it's really important that we have those things that constantly stimulate us, because, as I said, advertising, I think, fulfills some of our creative yearning, but not all of it. And the other thing is, this Oscar Wilde, I thought it was Oscar Wilde who said it, but then I found out about 5 minutes ago that it wasn't. He said, well, I thought he said, that you can never use creativity up. Creativity, the more creativity you have, the more creativity you get. It's this kind of self-fulfilling. And I find that to be true, because the more creative I feel, the more I want to do, and the more I do, the more I want to do on top of that. And it's a fascinating process. I think the trick is, like, how do we manage that within ourselves? How do we recognize that within ourselves? And then how do we manage that to sort of progress and make sure that we're being as creative as possible? So the very first question, or the interactive element of today's seminar, is how many of you actually feel that you're as creative, or working in a company that is making you be as creative as you could be? Now, there's a visual of putting your hands up. I don't want you to do that. What I want you to do is close your eyes and then ask yourself, how many of you actually think you're being as creative as you are, and then put your hands up. So if you all close your eyes, put your hands up.
See you.
Put your hands up if you think you're as creative as you could be. Wow.
Open your eyes.
Every single one of you put your hands up. No, they were like, I would say probably, it was actually a lot better than I thought. I mean, worse than I thought. They were like, yeah, he's but you're allowed to. There were probably 5 people out of, I don't know how many people there are in here, a couple of hundred, which is quite sad. If you think that we're in a creative business, and you feel that there are 5 of you in here that feel that you're as creative as you could be. And that's, in a way, the kind of the unpleasant segue into the next section.
Unpleasant segue. So that's Dave Buonaguidi, who's on token Italian. And I'm Richard Pinder from CP+B as well. And really what we asked ourselves is, why is this? Why do we think that's the case? And it's quite an interesting thing, because I submit that if you ask the same question of people out there, you'd get the same percentage of people. In fact, all the data says you will get the same percentage of people in the world outside saying that they feel creative. And we believe that education has a huge part to play in this. Education systems, I've experienced it with my children in France and the UK. Education systems in China and other countries are all doing the same thing. They're all focusing on measuring stuff. And if you measure stuff, you want to have stuff you can measure. So what do you measure? You measure things that are quantifiable, and then you start to have conversations about mathematics, or you start to have conversations about linguistic abilities. And all these things are what governments are by and large measuring. And of course, what does that lead? It means that all of the things that stimulate divergent thinking are falling down the agenda of education authorities across the world. And if you've seen the most talked about and viewed TED Talk in the world, it's by a guy called Sir Ken Robinson. And what he has said very clearly is, if creativity was regarded the way it should be regarded, which is up there with literacy, we would all be in a much better place. He also points out that it is measurable that around 25% of all children, so that's 25% of all of you too, when you were kids, have to move to think. What he means by that is that if you're forced to sit down and be academic in the traditional academic way, you are disruptive. You don't play that very well. And if you think through some of the people who are the most original thinkers, the people who run dance companies or movies, or even people in this industry who are the most standout ones, they often will tell you they failed at school. Did they fail? Or was it that education failed them? There's a real moment right now where, as that generation is in the workplace, we haven't spotted that the next generation is being pushed much further down the same path. And it'll be 20 years before we realize it, and then another 40 years before we can solve it. So we think that Ken Robinson's right, and that creativity in education is the cure to solving a lot of the issues of today. Imaginative play, curiosity, these things really drive an awful lot of what we should be praising, I think. Now there is one company that's done a particularly good job of this. It's not the only one by any means, but it sort of has to. It's this company, Lego. Lego believes fundamentally that play drives curiosity, play drives learning. And Lego has made an awful lot of money in the last few years in this little town in the middle of Jutland, in Denmark. And in that money, it's a private company, they put it into a foundation. That foundation has funded studies out of Harvard and Cambridge University in the UK, Harvard in the US, on this topic. And 3 years ago, they decided to fund their own school. And they decided to fund it in the little town that they're in, 6,842 people. And this school is built all around these principles of play to learn. It leads to the same international baccalaureate that everyone wants to get to be measurable globally afterwards, but it goes through it in a totally different process. And I have to tell you, it's an extraordinary thing to see, because you realize that it is possible to do all the things that the education authorities are seeking, but to do it in a way that drives this kind of learning. And I've put my money where my mouth is, and I moved my 7-year-old and 4-year-old to this little town in Denmark 4 months ago, and I tell you the results are fantastic. My little girl is suddenly not the bottom of the class, but the top, because she is now one of those 25% who needs to move to think. But what's fascinating is, it is statistically borne out that that is correct. A very interesting research study conducted over many years with the same group of kids when they were 3 to 5, 13 to 15 and 25-year-olds, so the same people, looking at their ability to think divergently in those 3 decades of their lives, and look at the statistics. It falls off like a rock off a cliff. And this is really important. It's not actually that important to advertising. Of course it's important to advertising. It's not that important to the world out there that advertising has this problem. It's really important to us as a society. Up to 50% of all jobs are at risk from automation in the coming decade. The automation of manufacturing is as of nothing as to what's coming with automation of service sector. If we cannot train ourselves to think divergently as human beings, we are going to be automated out of things. And we can see the very beginning with Brexit and Trump of what that means to those left behind. And that's just the start. So we think it's actually not an advertising problem. It's a societal problem, and it really is important. So that's why the 2 blokes from CP+B, who know very little about society and only a little bit about advertising, are going to stand to one side and let you listen to an expert. Baldur Onarhein has been working with us on this, and he is the co-founder of the Copenhagen Institute of NeuroCreativity, and I promise you, he's way cleverer than Dave or I, and has some very interesting things to say on this topic. Oh.
Perfect. Thanks. Quite a good layout. So in neuroscience, we've been working with this declining creativity for a lot of years, and at the Institute of NeuroCreativity, what we try to figure out is how can we retrain adults to become creative again. So what we do at the Institute is we do a lot of classical brain imaging studies, where we look at the brain functions of super creatives, and we compare that to regular people, or less creatives. And we try to then identify exactly what are the brain patterns used by super creatives that we can train anyone to relearn. And there are basically 2 ways of doing that. One is through cognitive training. I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can do that. The other that I won't talk too much about today is through electrical stimuli. So this is a brain stimulator that you can put on, and then you can trigger those functions in the brain basically. But what we found to be the most important factor to make people creative again, in terms of the brain patterns, is their understanding of brain functions. So there's a direct link between how well people understand how the brain is working when they're trying to be creative, and their actual creativity. So I'm going to say a couple of things about how the brain works, so it might be familiar. When you look at this apple, what happens inside a brain is what we call a spread of activation in the associative network. So what the brain is doing right now is trying to gather all the potentially relevant information in your head related to an apple. And the problem is that what you get is only what your brain thinks is super relevant right now. And what is relevant and unrelevant is governed by a system called the cognitive inhibition system, which is trying to say, okay, so you just saw an apple, and which information you have already related to apple is relevant in this context. So if I would hold my iPhone in my hand, you are more likely to use associations related to Apple the computer. If there was a banana on stage, you would probably think about Apple as a fruit. But your brain is super effective in limiting what we call the remote associations and only focus on the close ones. And this is actually a problem because when we are trying to be creative, what we need are the remote associations that our brain doesn't give us. So a lot of creative work is actually about finding those remote pieces of information that the other people working on the same type of task are not accessing. And there are a lot of ways of measuring how people can do this and how well we are at accessing remote associations. And we're going to do a small test right now. And no panic, we're not going to count. So hopefully most of you have an A3 sheet of paper. And on this sheet of paper, you also need a pen or a crayon. There should be crayons in your conference bags. So please do not start yet. So on the sheet of paper there are 12 boxes, and inside each box there is a doodle or some line, some unfinished picture. And when I say go, I want you to take 3 minutes and try to finish as many of these pictures as possible. So inside each square there is a doodle. What you're supposed to do is to take what's in the box already and finish that into something that is recognizable. So again, when I say go, you take 3 minutes and you turn as many of these existing doodles into something recognizable. If you have no idea what to do, put your hand up and I'll walk around and help you. But we have 3 minutes. So go ahead, be creative. And time is up. So what we want you to do now, hopefully a lot of you are on Instagram, so what we want you to do is to take a picture of at least one or multiple of your doodles and upload them to your Instagram account with the hashtag CC_Eurobest. The Wi-Fi in here is a bit dodgy, so at least try to do this.
Well, if I may say, the other thing we've just been practicing is to see, and the Wi-Fi is really slow, so maybe if you use your data, get one picture.
And then feel free to send in the receipt and we'll pay for it.
Yeah,
No.
Okay, so while you're doing this...
You get commission from Telecom Italia.
Yeah, so while you're uploading your pictures, we're going to say a couple of things about this test, because what this test is actually doing is it provides you with a little bit of priming. So inside each square there is a type of priming, and then your brain takes that priming, it finds some associations, and then it quickly turns that associations into the new picture that you're now making. And if we look at the type of pictures or the primes that we've given you, the first one, I guess a lot of you made a stair or a staircase. I walked around, I saw a lot of you did. And we've been priming you as well in the talk, so we've said stairs a couple of times. Even the guy who came on stage before us said stairs. And that's feeding our cognitive inhibition system, so it's so easy for our brain to think about stairs, because with the visual information you have, with the verbal information you have, then a stair or a staircase is the most obvious thing to make in the first one. We were supposed to say something about the sun. I'm not sure if we did, but if we did...
It's a sunny day.
Yeah, it's a sunny day, yeah.
It's right.
So the last square as well, the lower right corner, has very strong priming towards the sun. So if you got there, I guess a lot of you also have some kind of sunny picture on the lower right-hand side. And what we wanted to do was to compare what you've done here to some kids. So we've been out and doing this very same exercise with a group of kids, and we're now going to show you how they did it.
Two ranks and then the head. already know much, they can just draw anything, so
when you're an adult, then you know more stuff, so that means you can draw more stuff.
I know, but you're more creative when you're younger. Dad?
Mummy. Daddy is more creative. And look what I can draw. I can draw hearts. Oh, that could be a pyramid. Wind comes from clouds. That could be a whirly-whirly slide. Then into a fall. Yeah, I hope it is because I'm really big, because I can climb really tall trees.
If something's abstract, then like everyone has their own opinion.
Children have a bigger imagination.
So whenever we work with kids, normally we work with adults, but whenever we work with kids, it makes me feel so bad. It makes me feel so uncreative. And I think hopefully we have on screen some of your uploads. Yeah, we'll have it in a second.
Here we go.
So the interesting thing to me, from a neuroscience perspective with all of these, is they are predictable. In the sense that we can calculate about 90% accuracy what people will answer to these tests depending on what we put inside as primers. So only about 10% of the population adult population managed to find associations that we didn't prepare them to do.